So I suppose I'll start. Hi, I'm Alex Wu. I use any pronouns. I am one of the co-developers of this panel. I am a high school volunteer and a member of the Youth Council for the League of Women Voters. The Youth Council is what organized this panel. It really started with James's interest first. But then it sort of growed out from that as a project that we took on with the rest of the league and the rest of the Youth Council. So basically we've done that. We've reached out to some panelists. And then if you're interested in some other projects the Youth Council has done, we do have an Instagram and we also have a newsletter. And you can also see the rest of the leagues and our local leagues events on their website. So if you're interested in other events like this, then go, be sure to take a look. I'll hand this off to you, Ella. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name's Ella. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a current junior in the Central Maine area. I'm one of the co-developers of this panel with Alex and James. So we're all Youth Council interns this semester. And if you're not familiar with the Youth Council, they know Alex mentioned, we're kind of this group of young people. It's hosted by the League of Women Voters. And we work to promote change in education throughout the state of Maine. So each semester we get a group of interns, there's a group of interns who get together, and so we learn about specific issues. We put out a newsletter and we create events like this one. So yeah, James.
Hi everyone, my name is James. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a rising senior in high school. I'm also an intern for the League of Women Voters of Maine. To begin this event, I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. So we are acknowledging that we are in Maine and we're living in the homeland of the Wabanaki, the people of the Don. And I currently am residing in the former land of the Secocas tribe, which is now Old Orchard Beach. I encourage you to visit native-land.ca to learn more about your community. And despite centuries of colonial theft and violence, this is still Indigenous land. It will always be Indigenous land. The Wabanaki peoples, including the Passamaquoddy tribe, Penobscot Nation, Aroostook Band of Mismac, and Holton Band of Maliseet are still struggling for rights to their land and waters and for their inherent sovereignty to be fully recognized. The Youth Council stands with them in support of their continued legislative efforts towards tribal sovereignty. And if you're interested in learning more about tribal sovereignty in Maine, please look into the Wabanaki Alliance, which is an alliance of tribal leaders that focuses on educating Mainers and advocating for sovereignty. So now I'm going to share a bit about the inspiration for this panel and how it started. So the inspiration was taken from examining who within town government has the most power and influence surrounding different issues and topics. I had the idea originally because I was doing a project on the Indigenous and Black history of Old Orchard Beach, where I am right now. And I reached out to Jeffrey, who's here right now. And Jeffrey is the town planner of Old Orchard Beach. So he was able to collaborate with me on this project. And I decided to continue looking within my town to find other panelists who wanted to talk with me about DEI. And the other interns continued this approach. And this panel is going to dive in how town officials with different positions and job titles are incorporating all voices and perspectives in civic work within the town hierarchies, which I was researching along with the other interns. And I'm going to pass it over to Ella.
Real quick before we pass this off to Ella, I'd just like to say again, thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you so much for being here, especially from a youth-led panel. Before we move on to the first questions, actually, why don't you all introduce yourselves and what your role in local government is so we can get a better idea of what you guys do.
I'll go first.
Yeah,
Jeffrey?
sure.
Yes, sure. Thank you. I'm Jeffrey Hinderleiter. I am the town planner for the town of Old Orchard Beach. I've been a planner since 1999. I've also been code enforcement officer, director of development in several municipalities in Maine. I've been in Old Orchard Beach for 12 years now. And one of my primary responsibilities is to help guide development activity in the town. And development activity actually, it's really ranges, and there's quite a range. I get involved with everything from someone who wants to place a shed on their property to demographic projections, to 60-unit developments, to marijuana ordinance writing. So my role kind of varies. I feel like I'm a bit of a catch-all for the municipality, where when there's something that comes up and someone's trying to look for some sort of help with something more complex, they kind of come to me. I feel very fortunate to be in that position too. So that's me.
I'm happy to go next. My name's Freyla Tarpinian. I'm the vice chair of the Board of Education for Scarborough Schools District. And I also have been on the DEI committee for the school committee since 2021 when it was founded. In addition to that, my day job is I work as a prosecutor. I'm the deputy district attorney of Kennebec and Somerset counties, which is sort of central Maine. And I've also been a volunteer on a number of different boards and nonprofit organizations in a lot of southern Maine. Most recently, Seedlings of Sunflower, which is a childcare center, as well as Writing to the Top, which is a therapeutic writing center. And I've been on the Board of Appeals for Wyndham and for Scarborough when I moved here. So I'm very thankful and I appreciate being invited to speak today. Thank you, Alex, and the rest of the Youth Council for putting this on.
Yes, I can go next. It's been a little silent. My name is Omar Balde. I am the director of Portland's Department of Justice, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Part of my job here is to basically counsel the council on social justice related issues, as well as ensure the city's compliance with the state and federal civil rights laws and regulations. That is my life as a City of Portland employee. And other lives that I have outside of here, I am a board member of the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, as well as the American, the National United Nations Association. I just resigned from that because I moved here from Iowa. That was in the Iowa division for that. I'm a lifelong civil rights advocate. Prior to moving to Portland, Maine, I taught at the Eastern Iowa Police Academy. Some of the courses there were, the one I taught at the police academy was race relations and intercultural communication. And then I also taught at a college there called Wartburg College in Northern Iowa, an undergrad course on global citizenship with a focus on equity and global diplomacy. Because when we look at the United Nations, since its founding in the 1940s, we have not had a general secretary of the UN who identifies as a female. And so there is something to look at there. And so when we talk about equity and social justice, we need to start with a global governance and go down from there. So I'm very happy to be here. Very happy that to see young people putting this together. It reminds me of my activities with the Model United Nations with the high schools in Iowa. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're all super excited to have all of you here. Before I jump into our first question, if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask the panelists, just drop them in the chat and we'll have a Q&A period at the end. And so our first question is kind of, what does DEI mean to each of you personally? Freyla, do you want to kick that one off?
Sure, I'd be honored. So DEI is, I feel like it's a catch-all phrase that's really broad and intended to be really broad. And I see DEI really as making sure that we look at everybody who we're serving, whether that's in my school community or in the community at large, and really ensure that there's representation and people are being seen and included when the big decisions and the little decisions are made. It's so easy for things for people to get lost if business as usual, when you think about like historical systemic inequality, and when we just kind of float along on how business has always been done, we really have left out large swaths of people. And if you don't think about them in a really intentional manner and really embed in your decision-making a broad lens, you leave people out, and that historical exclusion continues on and gets into the future, which is something that I don't want to see happen. And I think many people who have intersecting identities perhaps don't want to see happen. And I think, so that's really what DEI means to me. It's really, sometimes there's a J on the end for justice, sometimes there's a B on the end for belonging. It's really the sense of making sure that we really are including all of our citizens, those who are really visible out front, and then also those who maybe are not as visible. And there's a variety of different identities that can cause that. And most those are not mutually exclusive. So many people have multiple different identities, and there's different aspects when they're not at the decision-making table and they're not being intentionally brought up, then there's, historical exclusion. So DEI really is about making sure that we take time to consider everybody and make sure everybody really does include all those, not just the loudest or the people in front.
Before you continue, Jeffrey, just another thing for our panelists. We do have like a structure, but feel free to just pop in discussion whenever. We don't need to have like everybody takes a turn. We can like have a conversation-based panel. We don't care what you do. We just want to hear your voices. Again, sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to get that out there before we continue to make sure that you know how we want to structure this.
Sure, and just I'm running a blind here, so I apologize if I just kind of pop in and I can't see like body language. I can't see anything.
Fine.
So that was an excellent response, and really, when I think of DEI, I really as a planner, I focus on the inclusivity piece as one of the most important pieces of the planning process. And it's really important that we incorporate all the voices that we can to make that planning process as healthy as possible. And one problem that we have is we can't reach everyone that may be affected by a proposal. Some people we just don't know. We don't know who will move into the next house or who might be impacted by a study directly, and others can be very hesitant to be active in the development review process. People are nervous with public speaking. They don't want to be in front of a camera, but just because of those issues, those barriers, and I use barriers quite a bit, doesn't mean that we can't think of those voices. So I like to think of part of my responsibility as a planner is to be a voice for the voiceless. And James was a great guy to work with. One thing that he knows that I do, and I've worked with several colleges, and I have interns pretty much every year. One of the things that I do is apply one of the methods that I use when I look at development proposals. I apply that in my teaching to the interns that allows them, and it seems to be very successful, to get those broader perspectives so they can be more inclusive when they're looking at a particular project, and to have that that viewpoint that they may not necessarily think of, or to incorporate a viewpoint that they don't disagree, that they don't agree with at all. So making sure that the voices are heard, that we're inclusive in the decision-making process, is really important, and that is probably, I would say that's the most important part of DEI for me as a town planner.
All right, I think for me, I'm gonna have to give my definition of DEI, and then I'll put that in perspective. I define DEI as basically embracing, not only tolerating, but accepting, recognizing, respecting, accepting our differences as human beings, regardless of our protected or constitutionally protected status, which is religion, race, gender, sex, sexual identity, even national origin, things like that. Just simply accepting that our differences do matter. They are valuable. Reason why I define DEI this way is because my background is pretty colorful. I was born to a traditional, very devout Muslim parents, and then raised Catholic, and ended up being adopted and living in Israel with by a Jewish family before moving to the United States. So there I have experienced it all, DEI, in many different aspects and forms of it, ranging from social and cultural perspective to religion, to politics, because again, my bachelor's degree was in political science, and I've been politically involved and active for years. And so that's how I look at it. I think it does, this definition to me makes a lot of sense, because we all tend to tolerate each other. We live together, we tolerate each other because we're neighbors. I don't want to move away from this neighborhood, and therefore I have to live next to you. I have this job, I don't accept you, but I have to tolerate you because we have to work together. That is not DEI. We can't just, check boxes and be like, yeah, we got this person here, he identifies as this, and therefore our workplace or our community is diverse. That does not work. We have to make sure we accept each other. We choose to be next and by each other. We choose to stand for each other. That is what DEI means to me. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
It was really interesting to hear how all of your different roles or past positions impact your definition of DEI. So moving on to the next question, it's about why is it important for there to be diverse individuals in leadership positions? So this is similar to the previous question, again, talking about DEI and leadership.
I'll go, Jeffrey. In my opinion, I love having diversity with leadership positions, because that creates different opinions, that creates different views on whatever the particular subject may be. Everything, believe it or not, when it comes to some of the down-to-earth municipal work, and you're thinking of a sewer line placement somewhere. Well, when you create that sewer line, someone may have a particular opinion that it should go in one direction and be sized a certain way to accommodate a certain type of development. But they may have that perspective from like a pure engineering standpoint. Then if you throw in the planner's viewpoint, the planner may say, well, we're looking at some land down here for affordable housing. So we want to make sure that the sewer line is so sized appropriately in order to accommodate that those 60 extra toilets and 100 extra showers, whatever it may be. And then you may have the other opinion that says, whoa, hold on, we need to think of the municipality's finances. That's great on both of you, but how are we going to do this? And behind all of that, though, is built-in knowledge that a particular person has in order to offer that viewpoint. Because by hearing those different viewpoints, ultimately what you do is you come out with the better project. You come out with something best, you come out with collaboration, and you come out with something that you think is more ideal for the community. Not only the centralized and immediate neighborhood, but the community as a whole. You have to often, as a planner, have that 100-foot view, that localized neighborhood view. But then you also have to think of the 30,000-foot view. How does it affect the town? How does it affect the region, and so on? So I'm going off script there a little bit, but having that diversity of opinion is key to the decision-making process. Thank you.
I agree with Jeff. And I think that diversity in leadership basically is what creates amazing things like this, what we are, this setting right here where we are. This diversity of knowledge, diversity of experiences of these young people is what brought us here together today. And that's what I think it does in every level of leadership. In city leadership, for example, city government, it's very important to have those different viewpoints, and also it helps build trust. There is a lot that goes on in our communities that the leadership cannot get to, or does not get to the leadership, because there is not that trust. So diversity basically creates that tunnel, that bridge, to build trust and connections between the leadership as a team or as an organization in the community that we serve. Sometimes there are ways we express our concerns, our needs, our opinions differ from who we are getting it to, who we are trying to reach. For example, my position here was created 2 years ago and was approved, and I got hired this year. Since I started here 4 months ago, I have heard and uncovered a whole lot of concerns, and not only concerns, actually really good comments and feedback from the community than they have had here in probably 20 years, because I became that avenue for people to reach the city, underrepresented communities that did not think they could even talk to a city manager or a mayor. Now they know they can. They come here, they see, they feel represented. I can speak and communicate in 13 different languages. And so everybody that could speak those languages, even though they speak English, they feel more comfortable communicating and expressing their feelings in their own native languages. And so that really helps. That is what diversity does in a team, and a leadership team in particular. So I think it's very important. So it really opens those doors. Helps people to smoothly get out of their comfort zone and feel more comfortable with the uncomfortable. So That's my take. Thanks.
I think one of my favorite quotes of all times is, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. When you think about the place where power resides and where decisions are being made, when you don't have people's perspectives and really personal perspectives, it's very easy for things to get lost in the mix. And so one of the things I get the opportunity to do at this Board of Education is I'm the chair of the policy committee, which is, for some people seems really boring, and I won't go on the tangent of how much I love policy because I really, really love it a lot. But when you get into the weeds and you start formulating policies that have real world consequences on the citizens that you're serving, in this case, it's the school community, largely students, staffs, and parents, community members. If you don't, there are moments when, as the only queer person on the school board, when you're formulating language and you're thinking about what that means and how that's going to impact or land on the folks reading the material, if you don't have someone who has that perspective to say, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't really sound right, or this is not, you think they're saying this, but you're really kind of missing the mark a little bit. And it's just because, if you don't have exposure to people who are different than yourselves, it can be really difficult to think about things that don't occur to you. And if you've never been the only one in the room, whatever room you're in and whatever one you are, it's a really, it can be a really enlightening experience to stand in a place where you feel very isolated and then think about how to build community. And I think, again, bringing the DEI work into the community is to make sure people who feel that way do have access to power and are able to at least have representation where decisions are being made and where policies and procedures are being formed, so that decision makers, those who are holding power, are able to do so with a really broad view. And I think if you look really nationally right now, there's some pretty stark examples of folks who really are intentionally excluding communities and groups in power. And sort of like that's kind of the opposite of how I look at DEI work. But there's really, if you have an intentionally excluding groups of people in order to, if you think about power as a finite resource, in order to hoard power for the group that you're representing, there are some really dangerous real world consequences for the groups that are essentially erased. And so again, I think bringing in and making an intentional decision to try not to erase anybody, and to really make sure that you have a broad view. And when you make mistakes, acknowledge them and do better next time. I think that's really why it's so critically important to have a lot of different viewpoints, diversity at the table, particularly where there's power and decisions being made.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think especially talking about that's a really good quote. I think I need to write that down somewhere. That's a really good quote. Kind of branching off of that, Freyla, you talked about how sometimes like being the only queer person on the school board committee can be isolating. Sort of what's an experience you've had in your position working with like the community surrounding DEI? And I guess sort of how do you think that not being the only person that understands your own experience can sort of help with that? Umaru, I believe you also kind of talked about this with your many with the many languages you're able to speak, and how you're able to help people speak in a manner which they're more comfortable in. So I'd like to hear from you about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think based on my experience, I think we all have, as human beings, naturally, we fear what we don't know. And so it's very important for us to find a way to be comfortable just to learn. Sometimes even learning is really hard. How do you approach people, especially with cultural differences? For example, one of my first culture shocks when I came to the United States was trying to shake somebody's hand in college when I first met them, young college students. I just came down to a group of 5 college students standing there talking and about their own lives, and I came in. They've never seen me before, and I tried to give a handshake, and they all pulled back, like, oh, they were asking each other, "Do you know him? Do you know him?" We're like, "No." One of them was like, "It's awkward." I was like, right, but things like that is just being comfortable with that situation and approaching people. I told them, I don't know you, but I'm also new here, trying to make to get to know people, right? And so that is one example of this. To me, being able to be comfortable. I'm not sure I got your question exactly.
Sorry, it was sort of like a catch-all stuff.
Oh, so yeah, with the experience part, yes. So that is one part of it. In previous jobs, not here yet because I'm quite new. I'm trying to build a team here in Portland to get this up and running. It's a new department, but in previous jobs, I found it very important to reach out to those who are basically feeling underrepresented and left out, because a lot of times you'll find really great values in people who have been left out. They focus on learning. They are not given the opportunity to share, but they're learning a lot. They know a lot. They bring a variety of knowledge. And so it was very important for me to reach out to certain community leaders or community centers and the members there who are basically just closed in. They have their own cycle. They're in this little comfort zone, because they don't think they would be accepted out there. Their opinions matter. And so I approach them, with a learning mindset. I want to learn. I'm not here to teach you anything. I'm not here to, for example, an association that I worked with that helped people who are differently abled, right? And so I came there. I'm walking into this meeting, and I saw somebody coming in on a wheelchair. I ran in front of them and grabbed the door to open the door for them, because automatically that's what clicked with me. And so the lady just stopped the wheelchair and let me go through. I held the door. I was like, no, I could open my own door. I was like, I'm so sorry, because this is my ignorance. I should have asked, do you need help? But I didn't. And so that is where, before even we got into this meeting, my learning process started. I just learned that, see, I should have asked. And so there is a whole lot to learn out there from each other and about each other. So my experience really was working with groups like that from different backgrounds to just learn about specifically what they feel, actually asking people to really, in every meeting that I went to name your emotions. What do you feel? What do you feel about this? Because it does matter. What do you think? We all think so much, but sometimes we have more in common about how we feel about things than what we think about things. Our thoughts are super different all over the place. I can think about something right now, and next second I think about it differently, but the feelings take longer, And so that is where I try to tap into. And it really, I found it very helpful because they helped me build communities. They helped me get information that otherwise surveys don't get, but you get it through these people, just being there with them individually. That is very, very important. And it creates that level of trust, that collaboration, because we all ultimately want everything that we want. We will realize that we want it in common, to live comfortably, live safely, be happy, and that's it. But being there with each other is very important for that. That I've had lot of these different experiences, working with different groups of people and even individuals to promote, acceptance. I'm not for tolerance. I'm all for acceptance itself. Thank you.
I'm happy to hop in with an experience. So I think I remember my first DEI meeting really clearly because it was very different than anything I'd ever done before. And this was back in 2021 when the Scarborough formed their DEI committee for their Board of Ed. I was not on the board at that time. I was just a community member and a parent. And it was really interesting because I've been on a few boards and I've been fortunate enough in my professional career as an attorney, I often get a chance to talk to people and people often come to me with problems and it's solutions and it's never personal. Like that's like the hallmark of my career is that nothing is ever personal. It's always analytical. So what are these facts? What is the law? How do you connect it? And I've worked on both sides I've been a criminal defense attorney and then I'm a prosecutor. So I've done criminal law for pretty much my entire career and really thought about justice and things in big ways, but never personally. And I remember that first DI committee where people were talking, I was asked to introduce myself and then talk about sort of my different identities. And it was really, although I've always been out in terms of my professional career. So people have known, and I've been fairly open about being married to a woman. And so that's not an unknown fact, but that's pretty much the only thing people know about me. But then we start talking about our children and sort of neurodivergence and different abilities. My house is bilingual because one of my children is deaf. And so we use ASL to communicate as well as spoken English. And so we started thinking about putting in all these identities. And it was the first place where I'd really get to bring together both, analytical thinking, which is kind of what I do all the time and where I'm very comfortable. And then bring in the personal, which is sort of what do I bring from my own personal life into this conversation and how can that help inform us as a group and make us better with those different viewpoints. And so it was a very uncomfortable experience for me because I was learning, and unfortunately learning often is not very comfortable, but it's important. And so that was really sort of my first experience. And then we had this very formed committee with DEI. And then in the last year, we've really kind of become unmoored and sort of taken over the work because there was a facilitator for the first year. And then after that, we've lost our facilitator. And so we're sort of on our own. But this group of people that has changed, we've gained members and lost members, but this core group of people really moving forward with identity work. And then how do you bring that into policy work? How do you bring that into, how do we make Scarborough schools the best for all the students who go there and for the community members? How do we take different viewpoints? Sometimes people feel very emotionally tied to their opinion, and it can leave no space for other people to be, but how, the mission of our school district is to meet every student where they're at, to make sure that they can be educated. I don't think we do that 100% of the time, but that's our goal. And so I really think it's important to continue working along that. But that sort of my experience with DEI was really, it fundamentally shifted in me sort of taking my analytical side and marrying it to some of my identities that go with me wherever. And I'm sure, I am who I am wherever I am, no matter what I'm analyzing or not. But really surfacing your own identities, which helps with surfacing your own bias, helps with surfacing all the things that sort of underlie why you think what you think and how you think, and therefore what you do. So I thought that, I'm not sure if that exactly is on point with my experience with DEI, but that first meeting was really, I think I walked out of there, walked downstairs, and I saw my wife and I was like, holy moly, like, what have I gotten myself into? Like, I'm the brain person, I'm intellectual, I'm very comfortable with ideas and research. Bringing the personal into that has been really challenging, but I absolutely think it's made me a much better person, a better analyzer, a better researcher, a better thinker. So again, when you start thinking and really push yourself, you get better. And I think that's one thing that DEI really has forced me to be more intentional about. And I think that's better in every aspect of me.
I would love to hear some of your thoughts as a town planner, and Jeffrey, on sort of how DEI intersects with like how you're organizing the town. Pardon me, I don't know much about what a town planner does, but I'm sure that there's a lot of different things that go on with the communities you have to interact with when you're planning things. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure, I'll give you an example of something that just happened this week. And again, it's really good discussion today, and I do like the comments too about, you know, the personal side and then the analytical, the facts, the law side. That can be a difficult piece of my job, because one of my responsibilities is to enforce ordinances, which are basically the local laws, which have in some cases as much power, if you will, as a police officer with a speed limit law. You know, some of the more minor infractions, but they're enforceable. There are fines attached. You usually can't go to jail if you violate a land use law, but there are certainly consequences if you don't meet the local ordinances. And one thing that happened this week, again, I think of it as an inclusivity piece, is there's something that that's called an in-law apartment or an accessory dwelling unit. And typically what that is people like to have a separate habitable space in their home for a separate person. So a proposal came across my desk. Some folks weren't too sure what to do about it. And, you know, my first reaction is, well, what they're proposing, what's shown on their forms that they provided, I can't permit it under the ordinance. I can't allow someone else to authorize it to be permitted. But then I took a step back from that, and I wanted to look at the more personal, the more human side of the particular issue. So I explored a little more. I contacted, it happened to be a contractor who was put a permit together. And what I found was that a person who owned this one particular house, they had an ailing parent, and they wanted a separate space so their parent could have privacy, and that they could, and a space where they could kind of have their own privacy, but still be there and provide that in-home care so they can care for their family member for the rest of their life. Having been through that, I know how important it is to have your own personal space, to try to just break away sometimes. And so I thought about that human side of life, that ordinances can be so black and white. They don't necessarily take into account that human side. So what I did was I let's say I massaged the ordinance to make the intent of the ordinance still work, but to apply some common sense in this particular situation to allow this person who was disabled too, the family member, to allow them to live their life in a comfortable space. that's something that I've always tried to do throughout my career, is to listen to that personal side, to try to understand the personal side of things. And a majority of the time I've been successful. I certainly have been burned sometimes, but I think that's, you know, with the planners and DEI, the traditional sense of DEI, from what I'm hearing from the two other folks here, obviously very well versed in it. The planners' perspective, I guess I take a little bit of a different perspective because I'm dealing with development types of issues so often, but I still like to try to find that diversity, that equity, and the inclusivity within what I do by being that human being on the other side. Like the other fella, I apologize, I didn't catch his name. I thought it was brilliant, you know, where folks are comfortable coming and speaking to him. That is so important in community service. That I can't emphasize that enough. So, thank you.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I liked how you all kind of touched on the education component, and how like educating yourselves about people and other people's experiences is kind of so important to things like this. Kind of on the same, I guess, topic-ish. What do you think like the biggest roadblocks to furthering DEI work today are? So you've kind of all talked about how like education can often be a big component of that, and so like people understanding other people's experiences, but like what do you feel is really blocking people from really making some of these issues kind of become resolved, if that makes sense?
I go first. This is Omaro again. I think for me, the biggest roadblock is politics. We don't want to be Governor Abbott of Texas. And so, because again, the messages that they send is that this is bad. We don't need to know or care for each other. You know, you're banning books, you're banning DEI conversations, even simple conversation in an academic setting where, you know, all power basically starts is in education. And so if you block it right there, it's not growing, it's not going anywhere. That is basically the heart of education and everything. And DEI is, all of it basically is about education, educating yourself, like Ella said, educating yourself about others and educating others about yourself. And so when we go into politics and try to kill that part of it, then that's it. It doesn't matter what we do as here, like public servants and social workers, we're not going to get anywhere because the top leadership is basically stepping on everything that we are trying to do. That's one big issue and big roadblock that I think is very hard to break, because if academic educators, teachers, professors cannot teach and work on enlightening people or even learning themselves about DEI, then whatever else we do is really not going to get anywhere. This is why it's very important, I think, to have I don't like the word task force, but to unite around the DEI issue, because it's to protect everyone, basically. It's to protect our intellectual resources and our human resources, because the diversity is basically the key to the human resources. If you are not promoting DEI in your community, then you are not promoting the best talent. You are not inviting the best of talents that are out there. A lot of it, again, our country is a country of diversity. It's built on diversity, by diversity. people from all over this globe came here and made the United States what it is today. And so now if we are trying to suppress that, you know, we are setting ourselves and the next generations for failure and really for a huge amount of ignorance. And so this is why I'm very happy to be in on a panel like this put together by young people who are, you know, the next generation. And this is the future. That's what gives me hope. I've been doing this work for years and years, and just seeing the past year or year and a half now, and then starting next year, that I'm not going to be able, if I try to enforce any DEI stuff in my classroom for my students, I can get the college sued. And so that is very sad and very frustrating, you know. But I'm hopeful, you know, because I see people who are passionate about the work, who are standing up and, you know, to educate all of us about DEI, as this group is doing right here. This is what keeps me going and keeps me doing the work. So thank you so much for putting this together. But that is my roadblock. And then fear of the unknown. That is another one. So a lot of people don't know. You say DEI, they're like, oh, okay. They want to bring those people to take our jobs and take our homes and neighborhoods and change our culture and all that stuff. And you know what? We need some cultural change. That is definitely what we need. And we're not taking anybody's culture, but we want to blend all our cultures together to make it even more beautiful, because DEI is basically the spices that makes our lives tasty and beautiful and nice, you know. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I was going to say fear, Mara, exactly what you said. That is, and this idea that there's a loss that goes along with diversity, where there's this feeling, you know, most of the voices that I hear and the people I encounter who are really anti-DEI or scared of DEI, they really feel threatened, and that like there's going to be a tangible loss to them, to their children, to their future. From this. And so it's something to be feared. And I think that comes from misunderstanding mostly of what DEI work is intended to do, which is it's not intended to eclipse or to, you know, destroy or to take away from other people. It's really just intended to make sure that everybody is included. It's not just one viewpoint, not the viewpoint that's kind of been there forever. It's really making sure that we surface all the viewpoints. And I think there's, you know, confounding, intentional confounding and then unintentional confounding of this idea that if you accept people who are different than you, that you've endorsed their point of view and you have to give up your own point of view. And it's this sense of loss, or this fear of loss, and this fear of change that I think really just stops people from moving forward. And again, I think, you know, politics, I think there are people who are using this and intentionally misrepresenting and intentionally trying to use DEI as a wedge issue in order to gain power for themselves. And they're finding some traction. There's a number of national examples of that. And I think really the people who are most vulnerable to that way of thinking, and the people who I speak to sometimes in our community who feel that way, they feel very threatened by this other point of view, and they feel like their voices are going to get lost. And I think that comes from two places. One of which is if you've always been in the dominant position, and if your voice has always been the only voice, it can be hard to share that stage. It's going to be hard to think about things differently. And the other is, I think people really, you know, and I think youth are really, the fact this is a panel is great, that youth are really, children have really been held up in this national debate as, you know, the victims of DEI and the victim and some sort of, you know, this narrative that's put together that really, again, I think is intentionally confounding the ideas of loss and like loss which people fear, versus what I think DEI really is, which is a gain of a multiple different perspectives. But I think, when people believe that their viewpoint is the only viewpoint that's valid, and they can't accept other people's viewpoints, then if their viewpoints are challenged, it can feel a little scary and uncomfortable. And I think that reaction can be very unfortunate, because it doesn't have to be that way, and I don't think it should be that way. I think I had a very conversation with somebody really about some of our policies in Scarborough, where this was a real issue, which was, I accept that you don't believe this. That's fine, but there are members of our community that live this, and so you can't use your viewpoint as a weapon to erase other people's identities because it makes you uncomfortable. You have to accept that you may not believe the way someone else believes, and we can accept that, and that's okay. But it's when you take it a step further and you try to erase any identity or anything that's different than your own viewpoint, or try to diminish it or demean it as a way to kind of keep power and control in your own hands, that it really becomes weaponized. And that's when it becomes dangerous to other people, because people who are not in your viewpoint are, again, erasure is real, and it does a serious amount of harm to individuals when their identities are not included and seen. And when you don't see people, you lose, again, all the spices in life. Amaro, I'm going to steal your metaphor. I love it. You lose all the spices in life. And you continue to perpetuate inequity, which is something that, very few people are out in front saying, we don't want equity. I think it's that there's room for this discussion to take place, but the fear of loss is really hard to encounter. And when folks are in that place in fear and they feel threatened, it's very hard to have productive conversations, because when people are afraid, they just shut down. So I feel like fear. And again, I saw that from Amaro. You were right on the money with that one.
I couldn't say it better than both of you. Really, fear is what came right to my mind as one of the biggest roadblocks, for all the reasons that were just stated, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for all your responses. And I think that you all kind of touched on this, that DEI is so important for community building, and also important for working with community and making sure that everyone is supported regardless of their identity. And that ties into our final question, which is, how do you ensure that the people of your community, regardless of their race, gender identity, or socioeconomic status, see themselves represented in the work that you do?
Yeah,
So I'll
oh, okay.
first.
Jeffrey, go first.
Oh, thank you. So I'll go back to what how I answered the first question, and what I do is I physically and mentally try to change myself when I'm reviewing a proposal. And there's an author called Edward De Bono. He has a book called Six Thinking Hats. And basically that book's about decision making, but I created a hybrid of that where I put each hat that I put on, I think of that person's perspective when I look at a proposal. So what I find by actually physically doing that, I actually can put myself into that perspective, though I know I don't know everything. I can't know everything, the background of a particular person, all of that. but I do the best I can because I know that there are voices that just won't be heard. So I try to put that hat, whether I like that voice or not, went on, or I put the hat on, I don't try, I put the hat on, and I look at that proposal from that perspective. And I look at it in peace and quiet too. I will clear my mind. I will do whatever I can to try to get into that mindset and then look at that perspective. And I find that it helps make a proposal better, and it provides perspectives that I wouldn't even normally think of in my normal mindset. So it makes me a better person, which I always try to be. I think it makes a project better. It makes the town better. So that's what I do to try to get those other voices that just aren't necessarily heard. So thank you.
Umaru, would you like to go now, seeing as you were very excited to speak first? You are on.
Now I think I want to go last. Sorry.
Okay, Freyla.
That's okay.
I'm happy to jump in. I guess the two pieces would be to stay curious and also to seek it out. And I think both Jeffrey and Umaru have touched on this before on sort of their own practices, but I think it's really important. First, you have to stay curious. You have to really be interested and think about other people and different things and ask questions and really, again, get uncomfortable, but really look for differences and seek it out. And then the second part is really to seek that out. You can't wait and expect things that are going to come to you. Like people are not going to come and find you to tell you about their people are busy. They're doing their own thing. They're living their own lives. And you have to really intentionally try to go find voices. So I know, going back to the committee work that I do, we really try to if we think somebody has input or is a stakeholder in a decision that's about to be made, we seek out their advice. We really make sure that it gets filtered out to the people that the policy will affect, so that we can get their opinion, whether they like it or hate what the policy proposal is. But you can't kind of sit back and expect people are just going to like walk up to your town committee meeting on a random Thursday and give you their opinion. They're not going to do that. And if you don't seek it out and really intentionally look for different points of view, you're not going to find it. Most people live in an echo chamber and in a silo. It's a very comfortable place to live. But if you're looking to really grow perspective, and again, you're not going to love everything you hear and you're not going to agree with everything you hear. But if you don't push yourself into places that are new and unfamiliar and uncomfortable, you're going to miss out on a lot of information, and you're not going to be able to grow as a person.
Raylan, thank you so much for that. I realize I don't have much more to say, but I'm going to just add a little bit to what you just said. I do agree 100%. Seek it out and be open to learning. The other thing is, talking about learning, it's about reaching out, knowing the people that you live with, knowing the people who you work with. It's about Umaru reaching out to a mom who feels like the whole community is judging her because she is supporting her kid who wants to transition. It's about reaching out to to John and Mark, who have struggled to get married in the state of Maine or any other state. It's about reaching out to see how these people feel, what they go through, because I would not be able to relate. I don't know. Umaru is married to a female partner and has 2 kids. How do I know about, Alicia and Maria, who are married and want to adopt a kid, what process they go through, how hard is it? I have no idea. It's about reaching out to learn about all these aspects of life, of our society, of the people around us, what people go through, I move into a town and I'm looking for a place to live, and somebody tells me, oh, don't look in that neighborhood. That's exactly what I went. That is the neighborhood I want to live in. Because if I listen to that and everybody else says this is the bad neighborhood and they don't want to be there, they're missing out on a lot, and they are also marginalizing people who otherwise would teach them a lot and make their lives better. And that's exactly where I want to go. I want to feel and experience what somebody experienced who identifies with the LGBTQ plus community. How do they feel? I wouldn't be able to experience it 100%, but I want to know. I wore pink. I walked in pink heels. People looked at me strange. I was very, very uncomfortable. And from that day on, I was like, oh, at least I get a little, very tiny bit of what you go through. So it's very important to experience it, to try to know, to learn about everyone around you. Someone who is unhoused and sits on the street and basically eats their meals. If they get a meal, they eat it on the streets. I go out on my lunch break. I choose where I want to eat. I can grab a sandwich and come down and sit with this person and offer them a sandwich. Let's eat together. Tell me a little bit about yourself. That is what community is. To me, that is what brings people in. That is exactly as how the strategy also that I used and I'm using currently is the reach out, part of this. Reach out to people who otherwise thought they could not or they should not step into the city hall. Reach out to them. They want to meet with me. I tell them, oh, are you comfortable meeting in city hall? Oh, I've never been in there before. Can I? Like, of course, this is your hall. You put us here to work for you. So basically you should know you are the boss. You can come here and let's meet in here. Ask me anything you want. That is basically what I have done, and I still do, to get people to know, to realize that, we have a whole lot to learn. We will never, ever know it all. So that is my take on that. Thank you so much.
I think that now we have time for a question and answer period from the audience. So I don't believe I see any questions in the audience so far. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type them out. If not, I'd like to ask a question and pop out from facilitator mode real quick. But I think I'll give it like maybe half a minute if anybody has questions in the audience. Yeah. Okay, I think I'll just go ahead then. This one is specifically for Umaru. You spoke about I really like how you talked about like language as a barrier into sort of local government. Because my parents are first generation immigrants. So I'd like to know what sort of difficulties do you face when you're trying to navigate with like different cultures from different areas and like trying to help people understand government here versus like how culture works like wherever they may have been before?
Ooh, that's a big one. Yes, actually, I think everybody's familiar with what Portland has been dealing with the influx of immigrants and newcomers. I don't like calling them new Mainers because that is just not right. But newcomers to the state of Maine and the city of Portland. So many different languages and different cultures. These are not only people from Africa, and even those who are coming in from Africa speak different languages. They have different cultures. It's a large continent of about 54 different countries with, up to 300 different languages spoken there. And then leave alone those who come here from Asia, and those who come from Central and South America. It's a lot. So in the workplace, some of the things that happen is someone is hired and they English is not their first language, even though they are fluent in English, and so they are supposed to know or to read and sign, acknowledge that they got the rules and regulations of the workplace. And if you have not gone to school like I did and learned English for years, 20 plus years, you get a job and you are given this document that is a dozen pages long to read and understand and sign. That is a big challenge there. And it's in English, so you have to do it all in English. So we need to have documents translated, everything translated into a few other, the main languages that are spoken in the community, like Spanish, French, and now Portuguese and Arabic and others, so that people can actually read these things and understand them. The language barrier does not end there, because it's not only about spoken languages. There are people with hearing impairment, people who speak sign languages, but also when you say sign language, it's not only the ASL, it's sign languages also are different from depending on where they came from. The culture goes with the languages. There's a whole lot, like people who don't report crimes or harassment because in their culture that is not something that is common, so they don't know. And so the way we do orientation, we're super busy. You get hired, for example, you don't get that full orientation. You don't get an orientation from or by somebody who understands the culture you're coming from. Communication is really, really difficult. The hospitals around here also struggle with that because, for example, if a woman goes to a doctor here, has issues and calls the doctor, and they have to talk to a male doctor, and that is another problem. So, or even being seen by a doctor from a different gender or sex, it's very challenging. What I'm trying to do here is to start where I can to have policies and other important documents translated into as many languages as possible. I am responsible for the language access policy here as well, to make sure the policy itself is translated and then make sure we're also abiding by the policy to get people access. It's not only about communication, it's also about accessibility, right? So the languages and the ways we communicate do help with show how we provide accessible services to everyone in the community. The case of Portland is very unique, and it's very, very challenging because of there's many different cultures and languages.
Awesome. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And especially when people are coming from so many different backgrounds, there's so many other things you have to think about than just like, a very straightforward, like, okay, we need, we want to translate things into just like Spanish and French. Like there are so many other experiences and places people are coming from. And it's really important to acknowledge that and be able to kind of help people communicate that. So I'm just going to give another minute if anyone wants to drop any questions in the chat.
Evan just posted a question in the chat. Do you want to just read that out and our panelists can answer that?
Yep. So he said, you mentioned people's fear of losing power. Could any of you speak about how to get people to stop being afraid?
Oh boy. If I could solve that problem, I would win like a Nobel Peace Prize. I think the best strategy to deal with people's fear is really one-on-one conversations, which is, labor intensive and difficult, especially with people who don't want to have those conversations all the time. But you have to meet people where they are, even if you don't agree with that place. and you have to hear them out so that in order to get someone who's afraid to listen, I've found you have to build relationships, and you have to be able to connect with them and find something in common. And then from that commonality, if you can build some mutual respect, you can sometimes gently probe ideas about the fear of losing power. Nobody will tell you that they're against this policy or they want to ban this book because they're afraid of losing power. There's very few people who've conceptualized it, and anybody who's conceptualized it to that point is again one of those people who's intentionally confounding these issues and using it to do something else. And you're probably not going to reach that person if they're attempting to manipulate people with ideas like that. But if you're talking to somebody who is really genuinely concerned or afraid of something, or holds a viewpoint that's really kind of holding them back from accepting other people, again, it's a one-on-one conversation. It's relating to them even when it's hard, and then trying to build a bridge to probe that. But I think Evan just is continuing the conversation. He said it's a bit of an unfair question. But I don't think that's not unfair. I think it's totally fair. I mean, how do we make progress? How do we get people to stop being afraid so we can make progress together? And that's, again, I think it's what Umaro's, a year of life's dedicated to, it sounds like to me, which is having these one-on-one conversations with people, building relationships. And it's from there, if you build relationships with people who are not like you, that's when you can sort of move to a place of mutual respect, understanding, and acceptance. Again, and that's not endorsement. People don't necessarily endorse your view, but they have to accept one another's views.
I agree. Yes. It's very hard to eliminate fear, but it always starts with one person. Like if I want to help eliminate fear, I should be the one approaching the person who is dealing with that fear. Because what happens in most cases when people have this fear and they're afraid of even approaching you is, they just want to be heard, and they're even afraid to ask to be heard. And so if you offer to listen, just, somebody tells you, I don't agree with this, or I don't like that, just tell me why. And you just listen. You don't be defensive. You don't get defensive. You don't attack. You don't judge. Just listen. Sometimes you'll be surprised what results you can get from that. Someone will come back to you and say, wow, I did not expect anyone would listen to me or even care about how I feel. That's why I said in the beginning, it's very important to ask people, for people to name their feelings, their emotions. Is very important, because if I tell you I'm frustrated with all this, I feel sad about this, I feel, you're going to feel something. You're not going to feel everything that I'm feeling, but at least some empathy will come out of you. So that is very important. Everyone wants to get that, a little bit of empathy, not to be judged because, well, hey, I criticize certain individual and that means everybody else hates me, or I feel like everyone else hates me for doing that, or everyone thinks I did something wrong for voting for these or that, or supporting this. That's your own. You have the right to do that. You want somebody to acknowledge that you have the right to do that, and your feelings are valid, your fear is valid, but here is what we can do together, to get through this if you want to, or if you're willing to try it. It's really hard, but at least someone needs to be able to do that, to listen, to be just the listener and offer support and empathy, regardless of what the fear is about. Even for me, I had a neighbor who really thought, well, I was just one asylum seeker mooching out of government benefits. I was like, it took like a few months, almost a year, for this person to be able to actually stand and just say hello back to me appropriately when I walk by every day. I say, hi, how are you doing now? They just go like that. And then when I actually came down and had a conversation and asked to have a conversation, they stood there and listened to me, and then they opened up, told me all the experiences, and I saw the source of the fear. I understood it. I was like, wow, I'm so sorry you had to go through all that. but I'm here if you need to talk at any time. That really changed both our lives, right? Now it's like we just yell across the fences at each other. How's your day going? Oh, great. How's yours? Good. What happened in the city hall? And I just tell them everything. City hall sometimes sucks, but we're here trying our best, right? So we became friends. They just needed to understand that not everybody hates them for having a certain sign that says certain things. I was just curious about, you have this sign. What's up? I want to learn about it. So now I understand. So I think that is a way to one way to help with that part.
That's such a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have a question that's similar to that, also about the struggles of working with people and trying to advance DEI, but not damaging a relationship so that you can't work with someone anymore. And the question is, how do you balance creating radical change relating to DEI without alienating the people you are working with? And I know you touched on that a bit, Umaro, when you were talking about working with that individual. But in terms of like substantial legislative or progress in government, what's that like with a colleague?
So one of my heroes in life is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And what always struck me about her is that one of her best friends was Antonin Scalia. And if you know nothing about the Supreme Court in the last 20 years, or really longer than that, they were on the court for probably 20 years.
I just had to do this.
Yeah. They were, yeah.
Make me happy.
if they can find common ground in the opera, which is how they found common ground and at least one piece, and they could find mutual respect and understanding, I think anybody can, because they looked at law completely opposite. They looked at life and people completely opposite. And so it's not about agreement. Again, you don't have to endorse other people's perspectives. You just have to, what Umaro said, you just have to hear them. You just have to really just like practice kind of radical acceptance. Like, I don't have to agree with you. I don't have to like what you're saying. I can be personally offended. I talk to people who are very homophobic. As a queer woman who's married to a woman, that's offensive to me. But it doesn't mean that I block out what they say or I won't talk to them or hear them. I was raised in an evangelical Christian household. Like, I have a lot of people who I love who do not accept who I am. And that's hard. Growing up, that was very difficult. I'm lucky. I'm in my 40s, which is a beautiful decade so far. And with age, I think has come to accept that I love people who love me, but who don't love all of me. And if you can move through that, you can move beyond that to people who don't agree with you. I don't love a lot of my constituents in that way. That's not appropriate. But if they come to me with a viewpoint that I don't agree or share with, it doesn't mean I won't talk to them or hear them. And I don't just mean listen while I think about what to say back. I mean, really just sit with their ideas. And again, I'm not going to take them all with me and adopt them as my own. In many cases, I won't. But I'm going to, at least for a moment, just allow myself to share space with them and try to understand where they're coming from and what they're trying to say. And then maybe we can move forward. When I have conversations that are difficult, and I do a lot, mostly in my professional life, one of the things I think is critically important is that I believe every person, no matter what they've done or what they're doing, they deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. And so you just practice that moving forward. And it's hard. It can be really hard. And I don't always get it right. Nobody does. But you just keep trying. You just have to keep trying. And again, once you know better, you do better. You know better, do better, know better, do better. And that's a journey that never ends. You're never there. And there's always more to learn.
I absolutely agree. And thank you for mentioning my idol, RBG. she and John Lewis were like my dynamic duos. I always ask myself when getting in trouble, good trouble, always ask myself what would RBG do. So that was highlight of my day. Thank you. But I think you're right. It's I go back again to that being open-minded, open to learning things. Really get in Africa. We have a greeting that I came to like a lot in Zulu, which we say "Sawubona," means "I see you." So everybody wants to be seen. The way of saying hello, I mean, we say "I see you," right? That is a hello, and so everyone wants to be seen. Everyone, regardless of what they feel or think, they want to be seen. And so when you see someone, what do you want from them? What do they want from you? That's where we meet. So I want to know, like, well, you don't like some certain things. Just tell me why. Genuinely, I just want to know why, so I know, who you are, and that does not make me change or think of treating you in a certain way or a different way. I'm going to treat you as a human being regardless, but I want to know, to what limits, to what extent. That's it. We're not in life to make everybody happy or to expect anyone to make us happy, but at least let's respect the fact that everybody's feelings are valid. We just can't relate to them. We don't know what they are, what the sources are, but the way we think, like I said, is different. But every thought also can be respected. I don't allow, because I learned this a long time ago from a very wise man, my grandpa, who told me, you have to teach people how to treat you, right? So teach people how to treat you. That is very powerful to me. And so even with coworkers, I have my limitations. I tell them I have an open door policy and I accept everybody. But if you see me doing anything that you don't like, but you have no basis of no legal basis of criticizing me for it, it's your choice. Stay and talk to me or walk away. And that's exactly how I live my life. For example, when in college, I am what the Muslims call Hafiz. I memorized the Quran. And so I was an assistant to one of the community leaders at the mosque. But at the same time, I organized a walkout in solidarity with a fellow student who was basically abused, harassed really badly for coming out as gay back then in 2012. And so we organized a walkout where I mentioned this earlier, we wore pink dresses and heels, all men. We walked on campus, we marched, and we had banners. And somebody put a picture of this, including myself, on social media, and this imam saw that and he called me for a meeting and said, Omar, you are not a good representation for our kids, and so I cannot keep you as an assistant. I was like, well, thank you so much. Keep your mask. I'm out. Because to me, again, civil rights, really, human rights, human beings come first. Really, everything else is secondary to me. Humans, this human connection comes first. Everybody has a choice in this life. Life really is, like Americans say, it's black and white. It has to be. You have to take sides. If you don't, then you're not doing it right. If everybody likes Umaru, I'm on the wrong side. That's my take on this. So even at work, it's everybody. I will make sure you have all your rights, but I'm not gonna give you the rights to abuse or harm or harass somebody else. No, I can't do that. I don't like being a bystander. So I'm there to make sure everyone is treated the right way. Like I would like to be treated. Don't treat anybody the way you would like to be treated. Treat them the way they would like to be treated. That's my philosophy in life. Thank you so much.
I think that's going to about wrap up our panel. We are over time now, just a tiny bit. Thank you so much to our panelists, Umaru, Freyla, and Jeffrey, who I believe we might have lost connection with. Thank you to all our panelists so much. If you're interested in more league events, go ahead and check out the league, our local leagues, the League of Women Voter Maine's events page. If you're interested in more youth council projects, be sure to check out the website, our newsletter, our Instagram. I believe there was recently put up something, there was a new newsletter, and there was also something, I believe, about the governor's veto letter. So if that's something you were interested in, I believe James did a piece on that. And also just how to break down a bill is something we also did. Yeah, just thank you all so much for attending. Thank you, our panelists, once again. And I hope you all have a wonderful night, and I hope you enjoyed the panel. Farewell.
Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you so
everyone.
much. You're also amazing for putting this together. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.
Oh shoot, I forgot to mention the Wabanaki Alliance. Oops.
It's okay. Folks got it at the beginning, so it got it. You know, they got it at least once, and I will send the recording around to anybody. But you all did a really lovely
Oh,
job.
there's Evan driving.
Yeah, there's Evan driving. Wow, you can see the trees.
Sorry, Freyla, just real quick before you leave.
Sure.
The league is doing some stuff. We have a team on like local government, and we're doing projects on school board stuff specifically.
Awesome.
And I was wondering if you could send any information about how school boards work or how our specific school board works. This is probably something I'll have to tackle with you later, because I am extremely busy and frantic, because it's like right before school starts and I have so much stuff I need to catch up on. But if you're interested, potentially, another project, a separate one that I wanted to work on would be our student enfranchisement. I was talking to Colby a little bit about it during debate class, and I was talking about how it would be great to have our school or our student school board representatives if their vote wasn't theatrical. And I was wondering if there was some way we could handle that in district, because I believe I talked about that with the league, and they said that because it was a district municipality, county by county, it varies. I was wondering if that's something we could maybe tackle in our district first, because I believe it's only Scarborough, which might make it easier. And also
That's
because
correct.
I just think it's very relevant. And seeing as Maine is we're very pushing forward in terms of the country, I'd love to like set a standard and like hopefully get more school boards to be able to enfranchise their student school board reps.
Yeah, I'm happy to work with you. You can find all our information on our website in terms of the policies, procedures, and under the About tab. But if you have any questions or anything at all, just reach out. I'm happy to help however.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you so much. And
Yeah,
thank
take
you
care.
again for attending.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Have a wonderful evening. This was really
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you so
Farewell.
much.
How do you all feel? It went really well. That was such a lovely discussion. I feel really excited right now. How
I
do
think
you
we
all?
lost Jeffrey during the Q&A part.
Yeah, what happened to Jeffrey?
That's all right. We had Jeffrey for all the 5 planned questions, so that was that was a win. How do you feel it went?
I'm pretty happy with how it went.
I think
I'm
I think
glad-
Jordan was going to say something.
What?
Huh? Oh, never mind.
I'm really excited we managed to find panelists last minute. That was really hectic.